Hello, I'm Matthew Wilkinson, historian with Heritage Mississauga, and welcome to our Saturday matinee as we explore all things Santa Claus. And first and foremost, wishing you all the very best of the holiday season and a safe and happy and healthy new year. Our presentation is entitled Myth and History Combined, the story of Santa Claus. No byline, all the things you never knew about Santa Claus, or all the things you never knew you wanted to know about Santa Claus. It's a fascinating story, but also, spoiler alert, we might uncover some things that make you ponder, and ultimately we'll ask the question: Is Santa Claus real? Not sure we'll answer it, but we'll ask the question. Eastern origins and Western myth. Origins of Santa Claus are rooted in Christian traditions, but over time they have mixed with pagan seasonal rituals and beliefs to kind of create this individual, this story around a person that is rooted both in factual Christian traditions and biblical Christian traditions, but also in kind of the mists of time, if you will, and connecting to pagan beliefs. There are interlacing of mythologies and traditions from multiple cultures, and there's no singular version or idea of what the character or the individual of Santa Claus is. Depending on where you are in the world, many cultures have their own traditions that connect to one aspect or another of the story of Santa Claus. There's also no singular version or origin story, but there are common traits. There are things that emerge over time that really help to identify this individual that is Santa Claus, or we would recognize as Santa Claus today. What's in a name? For many of us, we use the words Saint Nicholas or Sinterklaas. Santa Claus is interchangeable. Santa Claus is really a vernacular corruption of the word Saint Nicholas. Germanic and Irish-speaking dialects kind of mixing in Boston and New York come up with this word of Santa Claus, but it really is a derivation of Saint Nicholas. Saint Nicholas, Sinterklaas, Santa Claus. Saint Nicholas's Eve on the calendar is connected to December 5th, December 6th being traditionally where present giving was associated with. Sinterklaasavond, the present evening, and again, St. Nicholas's Day on December 6th, something we still mark in our calendars today, although it has lost its association over time largely with the individual that is Santa Claus, and there's a reason for this, and we'll explore those connections to kind of the connecting to December 25th as we recognize it today, and Christmas. But Santa Claus, or St. Nicholas, was a real person. St. Nicholas of Bari. Nicholas of Bari lived between 270 and 343 AD. He was the Catholic bishop of Myra and Lycia. He was known for secret gift giving, such as putting coins in the shoes of orphaned or poor children, and in a way providing a secret dower so orphans would not become a burden on the church and could, particularly young girls, could marry if they had a dowry. He was involved in what became known as the Arian heresy of the Council of Nicaea, where unfortunately some fisticuffs broke out between Nicholas of Bari and another Catholic bishop, and we can see here in the tapestry down the bottom of Nicholas of Bari cuffing the other bishop up on the side of the head for disagreements on how the church should care for the poor members of their flock. Nicholas of Bari is the patron saint of both children and sailors, and very much associated with not only secret gift giving, but also looking out for the welfare of children in his parish. Those early Christian traditions around the individual of Nicholas of Bari, as the church expands into northern Europe, they meet with some traditions that are well entrenched and established, that are more pagan in origin, Iceland or Nordic, if you will, through Denmark and Norway and the northern Scandinavian countries, connecting to the traditions of Odin, who, again, the major god from Norse and Germanic mythology. He was, although associated with children, not necessarily through the gift giving, but more with kind of a fear that children would have of this individual if they were poorly behaved, if you will. Children would place their boots filled with carrots, straw, and sugar near the chimney for Odin's eight-legged flying horse, whose name was Sleipnir, to eat. And where else do you see 8 flying things at Christmas time? But we'll get into those a little bit further down. He would reward children with gifts, berry, or candy, or warn them with a switch under their pillow, twigs that were used as symbols of punishment. So you had these myths present in Northern Europe, beginning to mix with some of the Catholic traditions coming up from Persia and the Middle East, coalescing into new communities trying to find commonalities between existing and emerging belief systems. Naming the reindeer, where do the reindeer get their name from? Well, this ties into Norse mythology as well, and that's why, although it separates a little bit away from our timeline from Santa Claus, Clement C. Moore in 1823 came up with the names of the reindeer from a poem that he was writing. And he names them after the winds of Norse mythology, where Sleipnir, the eight-legged flying horse, originates, and he has 8 legs, again, for the 8 winds of Norse mythology. Those winds are translated as agitate, battle, malice, spirit, fire, desire, thunder, and lightning. And taking those as inspiration, Clement C. Moore names the reindeer in 1823 Dasher, Dancer, Prancer, Vixen, Comet, Cupid, Dunder, and Blixen. Dunder or Donner as thunder, and Blixen or Blitzen as lightning. Again, you can see the direct relation to a few of those names. Desire and Cupid, Comet, Fire, Dunder and Blixen, Thunder and Lightning. You really get this idea of the inspiration for the names by Clement C. Moore are connecting to these early pagan traditions of Norse mythology. December 25th and Christmas. The St. Nicholas's Eve, December 5th, St. Nicholas's Day, December 6th. Traditionally, that was the Saint's Day associated with Nicholas of Bari, where Odin's Day was connected with the Yule festivals of December 25th. It really is uncertain when December 25th first became associated with Christ. There was a Roman festival celebrated also on December 25th, known as Saturnalia, pagan rituals of feasting and cavorting and dancing and merriment and the like. And these were connected to the winter solstice, which traditionally was viewed as happening on December 25th. We know it today as more December 21st, but nonetheless, in pagan times, December 25th was the winter solstice day. Yule, the longest day, the longest night of the year. And this December 25th date in non-Christian circles was very much highlighted by feasting and gifts and the lighting of the ceremonial fire and the like. So Yule, Odin's Day, Saturnalia, very much connected to December 25th, where Nicholas's Eve, December 5th, and the day of December 6th. The date itself, Roman Emperor Constantine legalized Christianity and with the Edict of Milan, and called for the Council of Nicaea in 325. He was baptized on his deathbed in 337 AD. Perhaps not favorable or not proper to call him the first Christian emperor, because he was in the end of his life. But nonetheless, he legalized Christianity, and in the Roman Empire, the world's largest and most powerful political entity at the time, this religion spreads like wildfire. Connections between the Roman equinox observances, the Roman calendar observed the equinox ceremonies on March 25th and December 25th for conception and birth, and others connecting to April 6th and January 6th for Christ's association. Informal associations for Christ's birth on December 25th are found as early as 273 AD, but it's probably much earlier than that. But it wasn't until 336 AD, again, this is now over 300 years after the death of Christ, that the Roman Catholic Church has selects December 25th as Christ's birthday by a vote. Nowhere in the Bible or any of the writings that were passed down was Christ's actual birthday noted. So a date was chosen, and a date, in a sense, for what would become the biggest date, if you will, on the Christian calendar. Perhaps it's no surprise that they chose a date that was already being observed by, in a sense, their target audience, those that they wish to convert. So rather than forcing a large percentage of the population to change the date within the calendar in which they were already gathering and celebrating, they rather began to focus on assuming that holiday for themselves and drawing the audience with them, if you will. Origins emerge and converge. One early historian wrote on the selection of December 25th as betting on the winning horse. The date was already there, rather kind of shift the traditions over to the Christian beliefs, but using the date that was already marked on the calendar, if you will. And as a result, you have a real mixture of pagan and Christian traditions around our early Christian Christmas traditions that emerge in time. And they begin to imprint themselves on the communities that they intersect with. But as Christianity in the Roman Empire expands in the years after Constantine, and then ultimately with the Roman Empire wanes and Christianity is kind of left in its wake, the cultures in different areas began to kind of adopt parts of the traditions into their own communities. And so you see this spreading of Christmas traditions with a different local flair depending on where it is in Europe and the Middle East and the like. And so these things begin to kind of separate and have their own storylines. Eventually they will merge again, if you will, again with some variations for different cultures. Some of the earliest references to individuals we would recognize as a Santa Claus type figure, again, very much rooted in pagan origins. In Finland, you have the story of Joulupukki, whose name translates as Yule Goat. And he's originally seen as a very strict figure to be feared. He punished children. Over a period of thousands of years, he transformed into a happier image who gave gifts. The reindeer emerged with the story of Joulupukki. They're not flying yet. It's a single reindeer pulling a sleigh, and he lives in the mountains of northern Finland. What we recognize in this character today is similarities to the long beard, the older type of gruff old woodman, if you will, someone who comes out of the woods in the northern country, a long robe, dressed in warm clothing for the winter. There's similarities with the individual that we see as Santa Claus today with an ancient character like Joulupukki. In Belgium and the Netherlands, you have the emergence of Sinterklaas. Again, some of the commonalities, the long robes, the older gentleman, the long white beard. In this case, very much more Christian connections to it. He's dressed as a bishop. He carries a bishop's staff. He's attended by a servant who leads his white horse. The servant is a black servant known as Black Peter. He would reward. He was a stern bishop. He would reward children for good behavior and silence, and for those who misbehaved, they would get coal in their shoes, and the coal was delivered by Black Peter. If you touched the coal, you would get black in your hand. It was a sign of a warning, if you would. Coal being a fuel, a fire fuel at the time, a terminology that's somewhat still with us today, is when a fire burns down and gets down to its embers and eventually extinguishes. The common phrase is to peter out, and that is a reference again to Black Peter and to the mark of coal for poor behavior. Some of the traditional gifts at the time were gifts of the land. Again, these are very much tied to pagan traditions, if you will. Dried fruit, nuts, cookies, and the drink of the earth, known as wassail, which is fermented berries. And just fascinating interplays and interconnections between Christian traditions and some of those pagan beliefs that continue on in different cultures, almost very different levels of adherence to them. Austria and Poland, you have the emergence of Kringle, originally seen as a child, but later transformed into a woodman. He's seen as a secret gift bringer at Christmas time, particularly for rewarding children and orphan children. Again, that ties back to the stories of Nicholas of Bari. He was originally depicted as an angelic child, but those traditions of Kris Kringle eventually emerge in name with the woodsman figure, often depicted in blue, but again, the long robes and the white beard, very much a Santa Claus type figure, emerging with common traits in the winter season. In Germany, you have Belsnickel or Pelznickel emerge. Not the joyous individual that other cultures have, but rather more that one is focused on punishing for children who've misbehaved. Belzen and Nickel, Belzen to wallop or drub, and Nickel is a Palatine version of Nicholas. So the walloping Nicholas, if you will. And the appearance of this dark and foreboding figure was really one that was intended to scare children into being well behaved. And he carried with him a switch that he was a stick for beating the children who were not behaved. And if you had misbehaved, a switch would be left by your bedside as a warning from Belsnickel. In Russia and Belarus, you have Ded Moroz. In Slovakia, Dedo Mraz. Grandfather Frost, really seen as kind of a pagan winter wizard. He adopts more Christian undertones as Saint Mykolay, including a magical staff. He is depicted in blue right up until mid First World War. And of course, what happens in First World War? You have the communist uprising, and who says the winter character is not political in nature? He switches to a red color for a number of years before reverting back in more recent times to the traditional blue in this culture. And he's a gift bringer for well-mannered children, but more of a magical being, a grandfather Frost with a magical staff. But again, the commonalities are there. An older individual, the long white robes, in a sense, a form of a bishop's hat, and the long white beard, and you have these common traits that emerge over time. In Ukraine, Saint Nicholas Kolya, another version of Ded Moroz, and the Day of Nicholas in Ukraine was observed on December 19th, which included gift giving. He blue bishop robes. He was accompanied by an angel, not that distinct from the Kris Kringle traditions in Austria. Strong religious associations with Saint Nicholas Kolya. More of the Christian traditions have preserved and emerged than the pagan ones in the Ukraine in regards to this early figure as well. But again, the commonalities are there. The long robes, the white beard, and so on. The decorating of kind of the season and the giving of gifts associated with this individual as well. In France, you have two individuals, not one, that appear side by side. The Pere Fouettare, or the whipping father, was the kind of the servant and the accompaniment of Pere Noel, or Father Christmas. Father Christmas rewarded and gave small gifts. Well, the whipping father, the Pere Fouettare, was punished those who misbehaved. They did travel together, and so it's kind of you either were rewarded or punished depending on your behavior at the time. He was often Pere Noel was often appeared in green, while the Pere Fouettare in a dark brown. But green was a prevalent color for this early, lack of a better word, Father Christmas or Santa Claus character in France. In Great Britain, you had an individual known as Father Christmas, kind of the French equivalent. He was depicted as riding a goat. If you remember some of the traditions with Joulupukki, known as the Yule goat. Well, in this case, we have Father Christmas riding a goat and carrying a cup of wassail, which is the drink of fermented berries, very much a pagan tradition that continued on in some of these early Christmas traditions that evolved, particularly in Great Britain. Father Christmas was depicted as being kind of very sober and strict, not the jolly old fellow we see today, but something a little bit more austere, a little bit thinner. Simple gifts of the land, homemade fruit, nuts, berries, wood games, and the like. Practical and plain is a way to describe the British version of Father Christmas. But again, very much those commonalities are still there. The long robes, the long white beard, the older woodsman type of figure, bearing gifts of the land to his community. In North America, we often refer to North America as the melting pot, and perhaps the greatest version of that is the story of Santa Claus. It really is in North America that these diverse opinions on this Father Christmas or this Christmas time figure kind of collect and coalesce, and something singular emerges from this over a long period of time. And it's also here in North America that the name Santa Claus emerges. These Father Christmas and Pere Noel and Le Pere Fouettare and Kringle and Dedo Moroz and Sinterklaas and so on. They coalesce into something here in North America, particularly in Boston and New York. And it is here in North America that the connections between Santa Claus and the Christmas celebration are firmly rooted. And we'll explore some of those early connections to those traditions. You begin to see the stories of Santa Claus appear in print and in kind of vernacular discussions through publications in New York. As early as 1809, A History of New York, a figure that is described interchangeably as St. Nicholas and Santa Claus, described as equipped with a low, broad-brimmed hat, a huge pair of Flemish trunk hose, and a pipe. And that appears in Washington Irving's History of New York, published in 1809. And a long road before him, 1821, Arthur Stansbury writes in a book called The Children's Fred, Old Santa Claus with Much Delight. It's in this book that you have the first mention of flying reindeer, a sleigh, arrival at Christmas, and presents down the chimney. There's a picture you can see on the top left there of a prancing reindeer and a sleigh, but he's on a rooftop, because you can see the rooftop and the chimneys behind him. And how did he get there? Well, the reindeer obviously is a flying reindeer. And again, this is the Arthur Stansbury, 1821, The Children's Friend, the first book produced by lithography and illustrated in the United States. One of the stanzas from the story: Old Santa Claus with much delight his reindeer drives this frosty night o'er chimney tops and tracks of snow to bring his yearly gifts to yo. Very much kind of those early traditions of Santa Claus story. And that's as early as 1821. 1823, we've already mentioned Clement C. Moore and A Visit from St. Nicholas. We know a little bit better today as The Night Before Christmas. It was published December of 1823. Arguably, the best known and most reproduced poem ever created is on Santa Claus. And most of us probably know it by heart. 'Twas the night before Christmas, and all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. And we could go on. And it's rooted in kind of our early upbringings in North America. And this poem was published on the eve of what would be the Victorian era. And Queen Victoria herself was said to have known this poem as a youngster before she ascends to the throne, and brings these traditions with her to the throne, and then broadcasts them throughout the British Empire, the world's largest empire. And so these early Christmas traditions go to the corners of the globe, and kind of bring the seal of approval, if you will, from the royal family at the time. Again, most popular published and read poem of all time, Clement C. Moore's A Visit from St. Nicholas, or 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, published in 1823. In 1849, James Rees publishes A Christmas Legend, and he introduced Santa Claus and his wife, who he named Jessica Gertrude. We don't know where Jessica Gertrude gets the name from, but that is the first reference to Santa Claus being married. And what James Rees did was take some of those early traditions of Santa Claus, and he built on the story. He started to create some of the personal side of Santa Claus, and where he lived, and what he did and this kind of a structure of preparing for Christmas time. So just kind of the story of Santa Claus begins to evolve, and that's James Reese in 1849. 1902, Frank Baum gives Santa Claus a backstory, for lack of a better word. He explores the life story of Santa Claus from childhood to age 60 when he achieves immortality. Again, age 60, Santa Claus becomes immortal. He plays off the existing traditions, but kind of creates a new narrative for Santa Claus of how he got to where he is. And it enjoyed tremendous successes, reprints, and even films made of the story. And again, this is 1902, The Life and Adventures of Santa Claus by Frank Baum. Really in the Victorian era, you see the emergence of Christmas cards, and quite often it's the Santa Claus figure that appears on Christmas cards. There's no singular appearance or color agreed upon yet. You'll find these early Santa Claus type figures or Father Christmas figures arrayed in multiple colors, whether they be blues, greens, purples, and of course red as well. It enjoyed great commercial appeal. Very early on, Santa Claus was used to sell things. Gift giving was a big part of the Christmas traditions already in the Victorian era, and so the marketing takes advantage of this Christmas time figure that comes about through Victorian England and of course across the British Empire. Then you enter into an individual who many of us look back and see as kind of the father of the Santa Claus figure in its popularity, and that's a commercial artist, a German-American cartoonist and illustrator, Thomas Nast. And he worked for Harper's Weekly from 1859 to 1886, as well as the New York Illustrated News. But it was for Harper's Weekly that he began to produce images of Santa Claus. And these were the first kind of mainstream media broadcast, well, internationally to a sense, across the United States, but also into Canada, these images that would become Santa Claus. And many say that he depicted his early version of Santa Claus as a self-portrait. And there's a picture of Thomas Nast with his picture of this Santa Claus type of figure in his story. This is the first commercial depiction in mass media of the Santa Claus individual. And you'll be hard-pressed to find it, really. As you look up in the top corner here, you will see a tiny little fellow about to jump down a chimney, and there's the reindeer stretching off into the distance here. The church steeples you can see in the background. This fellow's, on the rooftops with the sleigh, and so you really begin to, this is a subtle reference to Christmas time and Santa Claus, but it is the first reference. And this is the Christmas Eve issue of Harper's Weekly of January 3rd, or the Christmas issue of Harper's Weekly, January 3rd of 1862. It's in the middle of the American Civil War. It's a dark period, and this captures the darkness, if you will. You see a wife praying to the moonlight out the window with two children snug in their beds behind. You can just make out stockings hung up on the fireplace behind. And then presumably this is the soldier husband with his head bowed by a campfire, keeping warm, likely under the same moon. And what is probably the most telling of this are his beliefs, Thomas Nast's belief on the war itself, and what a waste of life it was. You can see the fallen American flags and the cemetery in the bottom. This is a dark message, but there's a little bit of hope in that top left corner with the Santa Claus figure. The next year, the Christmas edition of Harper's Weekly, January 3rd, 1863, a little bit more overt and obvious. You have a sign here, "Welcome Santa Claus." You have the flag of the Union Army, or the North, if you will. So he's rewarding the good soldiers of the North. You have the children playing with their toys here at the bottom, and again the sign says "Welcome Santa Claus." You can just make out the sleigh with the reindeer into the distance, and he's rewarding those good Union soldiers at the top. So yeah, there's a little bit of a political message here as well. Santa Claus, again, if we look at it, it looks kind of like that might be the blue coat with the stars on it. Some of those early other culture traditions. The color hasn't emerged and the identity hasn't emerged, but nonetheless, we see these connections to this individual that would be recognized as Santa Claus. The next year, December 26, 1864, the Civil War is winding down. We have a little bit different of a story being told. It looks like from that first year, we have the soldier has returned home to be greeted by his wife. He's surrounded by his children, and a family gathering in the distance. There is the Christmas tree on the parlor table. At this point, the Christmas tree still hasn't made it to the floor. The tree was a magical symbol that was kept off the ground. It was many more years before the tree would move to the floor as we recognize it today. But you can see here, you have Christmas Eve. There's that woodland figure who's come down the chimney. He's got he's hunched over. He's got a sack on his back. The kids are asleep in their bed, and there's the Santa Claus figure about to do his work at Christmas Eve. And then you see Christmas morning, the family is gathered in the distance while the children check their stockings and open their presents by the fireplace. And so again, the Civil War is turning a bit by 1864. 1865, December 26, 1865, Harper's Weekly. You have the celebration. Santa Claus in the middle, wishing Merry Christmas to all. Little girl with her doll, little boy playing soldier with his bugle, and there's the celebration at the bottom. The war is over. And a year later, you have something dedicated directly to Santa Claus's work by Thomas Nast, December 25th, 1866. You can see Santa Claus in his works. There's the reindeer, the toy shop, Holly Flynn, the Naughty or Nice list makes a presence here. Santa Claus is not yet depicted as a full-sized individual. He's seen as kind of a round little dwarf, much like the Clement C poem. If you listen to the lyrics closely, he's not viewed as a full-sized individual at this point, but that will come in time as well. But December 25th of 1866, Thomas Nast explores the different works and the traditions associated with Santa Claus, kind of taking those early writers and depicting their works. And this becomes, again, those common traits that people adopt for the idea of Santa Claus. Early depictions in Canada. We have Santa Claus coming to Canada in 1876, the Illustrated News in 1880, Canada Queen 1890. We'd recognize, aspects of these as that Father Christmas, that Santa Claus type figure, but again, there's no commonality, or very little. What we do have are the kind of the long white beards and the long coats, but there's no singular image as of yet. There's no singular color. There's no kind of singular identity that has emerged, but it's beginning. We're at the early stages of media and advertising, and they will grab onto something. First picture in national print in Canada, December 21st of 1880, from the Globe, or now the Globe and Mail, depicts a Merry Christmas message from a fellow we'd recognize as a Santa Claus figure today. Just stooped over a bit with a big toy sack on his back, looking at a list in his hand. And again, that's from 1880. Puck magazine in Britain produces a humor and satire magazine published weekly. They produced special Christmas editions featuring Santa Claus, not always in flattering ways. Quite often he was imbibing of certain things and was known to kiss a lady from time to time. But nonetheless, you begin to have these commonalities of a figure emerging, kind of a chubbier, full-sized individual, but often depicted in red. And part of the reason was red because the color jumped off the cover in terms of grabbing your eye. It aided in the developing of an accepted look for Santa, but we're not quite there in kind of those common traditions as of yet. Not really until White Rock begins. White Rock used Santa Claus in their advertising between 1915 and 1925, principally for mineral water and ginger ale. And we look at those pictures that are produced by White Rock Advertising, and your eye is drawn to things that you've probably seen through Coca-Cola. But this is an earlier company, and not quite the reach that Coca-Cola would have, but nonetheless they've developed a common theme, perhaps inspired by Puck Advertising, Puck Magazine, but more likely inspired simply by the sale of their product and the color red is catching your eye. In the 1920s, it really is red that wins as the color. Some people have interpreted that as a result of poor lighting in theaters, and when Santa Claus was brought into theaters, red was chosen over green and other colors, simply for the brightness that it would appear on stage in a dimly lit theater. but another, it really is seen as kind of that advertising part of grabbing your eye, of this the red being a very bold color for making connections, kind of immediate connections to a product or to a sales idea. A familiar figure emerges, not quite in the way that we're used to seeing him. Chesterfield Cigarettes uses Santa Claus beginning in 1929 up until 1955 to advertise their cigarettes. And from what we've seen, this wasn't just at Christmas time, but at other times during the year as well. So Santa Claus is used in kind of ways we don't really consider perhaps being appropriate today. And that, again, marketing of cigarettes by Chesterfield. Coca-Cola emerges in 1931 and adopts the Santa Claus image for their advertising campaign at Christmas. The Santa Claus for Coca-Cola is created by artist Hayden Sundblom. Because magazines were widely viewed and because the image of Santa Claus appeared for more than 3 decades, the image of Santa most people have today is largely based on Coca-Cola advertising over those 3 decades of their proprietary use of their imagery. And very much connected. You can actually go, there's a Coca-Cola Santa Claus advertising collection out there that you can see online of all the hundreds of posters that were created with this red and white figure. And of course, Santa Claus, Coca-Cola is not only is its product, but its marketing goes around the world and transports that Santa Claus figure with them. And so they didn't create the red and white, but the Coca-Cola was certainly involved with the broadcasting and the acceptance of the red and white figure around the world. Just some advertising between 1931 and 1964, and again, we'll recognize this character in those 30 years under Coca-Cola as the Santa Claus figure. Again, often with that bottle of Coke in his hand, but nonetheless focusing kind of on the marketing of that time and season of this jolly fellow, and really cements the personality, if you will, of the Santa Claus figure. History's greatest pitchman. It wasn't just Coca-Cola that would use them. Again, we've already talked about cigarettes. Lucky Strike also used them, as others, as soap and cooking products and the like. You really had Santa Claus being used for a number of things. 1946, the Lanham Act in the United States really creating Santa Claus as a free man, asserting that Santa Claus was protected under common law, and Santa Claus is the rightful owner of his own trade names. And they fixed a date for the living individual of Santa Claus, born March 15th, 270 AD. That's the same birth date as Nicholas of Bari. And here we have, the federal statutes in the United States recognizing that Santa Claus had a right to his own trade names. So that was as of 1946. Santa Claus is a free man. Santa Claus has appeared in hundreds of films since 1897. 429 films registered using Santa Claus since 1897, the most singular topic ever featured in film, and they just keep coming. So Santa Claus is a very popular figure in the film industry. How about Mrs. Claus, or Jessica Gertrude, as we referenced earlier? There's no historical basis beyond James Reese's creation in 1849 for a wife of Santa Claus. Not to say they didn't have one, but it's James Reese's work in 1849 that appears to first mention his wife, of course, naming her Jessica Gertrude. She's also referred to as Mary Christmas, M-A-R-Y Christmas. Other names over time that have been applied to her include Mary Kringle, Rebecca, Martha, Carol, and Layla. In the 1960s, the vernacular term of Mrs. Claus kind of wins out and is adopted, and so Mrs. Claus becomes Santa Claus's counterpart, at least after the 1960s in popular traditions. What about the North Pole itself? There are many places that claim to be home to the North Pole, not just Canada, although I think we have a strong case here in Canada. We'll get to that in a moment. But Finland claims the oldest tradition of being Santa Claus's home. North America has traditionally placed his home in near the North Pole in northern Canada. Other countries that claim Santa Claus include Denmark, Finland, Sweden, and Norway. and some of the largest Santa Claus attractions are in countries outside of Canada. It's fascinating that you kind of have all these kind of different traditions, but they all place them obviously in the north, in the mountains, snow ranges, in the northern areas of Europe and North America. There is a museum to Santa Claus, the oldest themed attraction in the United States, known as Candy Castle. That's the town is named Santa Claus, Indiana. It opened in 1935 and is home to a department store, Santa Hall of Fame. Santa's Village in Bracebridge here in Ontario opened up in 1955. And there's a town in Indiana, Santa Claus, Indiana, was established in 1856. So just, fascinating connections to the early connections to the name of Santa Claus. But he is a Canadian citizen. Yes, indeed. Santa Claus is a Canadian citizen with a postal code created in 1983, HOHOHO, and with a population of 1. And it's a brilliant sense. In a way, it had a little bit to do with Canadian claim for Arctic sovereignty. Sorry, I struggled with that word tonight. Placing a postal code in an area to claim Canadian protection over Canadian citizen, and who would argue that Santa Claus doesn't exist. In 2008, Santa Claus was officially awarded Canadian citizenship, the only citizen to be awarded such in absentia. Jason Kenney, the Minister of Citizenship and Immigration in 2008, the Government of Canada wishes Santa the very best in his Christmas Eve duties and wants to let him know that, as a Canadian citizen, he has the automatic right to re-enter Canada once his trip around the world is complete. Well, perhaps a little bit of fun sleight of hand, if you will, or fun traditions, but a brilliant move in kind of government circles of creating an individual to protect Canadian waters, if you will, or Canadian territorial claims. But Santa Claus, again, is indeed a Canadian citizen. Is Santa real? Well, he's over 1,700 years old, according to his accepted birthday. Both the Canadian federal government and the United States federal government recognize Santa as a real individual. Santa is the rightful owner of his trade names for the delivery of gifts and toys to good boys and girls, and because he delivers throughout the country, his trademark enjoys protection throughout the nation. He is a Canadian citizen. He is recognized by federal post offices in both Canada and the United States. Canada Revenue Agency confirmed he has filed his tax returns, and NORAD recognizes and tracks Santa. Who's to argue with the federal governments of multiple nations who recognize that Santa Claus is indeed real? So with that, with a touch of humor and best wishes for the season, thank you and Merry Christmas, and I hope you enjoyed an exploration of Santa Claus with us. All the best.